The $50 bill slid across the Thanksgiving table and stopped against my plate. "Here," Dad said as 17 relatives watched. "Go mop something." Mom smiled. One daughter married a surgeon. The other cleans toilets. Nobody defended me, not even my sister. I didn't touch the money. I watched Grandma lower her fork, push back her chair, and stand. "Tell them where your daughter actually works." Mom's smile vanished. She had spent 20 years making me the family failure, but as every face turned toward her, I realized something she didn't. Grandma wasn't asking for an answer. She was giving me permission to destroy the lie. I sat in my car for 3 minutes before going inside. The leather seat was cold through my coat, and the windshield had started to fog through the front window. I could see Mom moving between the dining room and kitchen, carrying serving bowls like she was directing a holiday commercial. Warm light, white tablecloth, a wreath on the door, the kind of house that looked perfect from the street. I had brought green bean casserole in a chipped blue dish I'd owned since college. Nothing fancy, just butter, onions, pepper, and the same recipe Grandma taught me when I was 12. I pulled my gray cardigan tighter and told myself the same thing I told myself every year. Get through dinner, smile when needed, leave before dessert turns into a performance. Inside, the house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, and coffee that had been sitting too long. Mom barely looked up when I walked in. "You're late," she said. I checked the clock. I was 11 minutes early, before I could answer. She handed me a stack of plates and nodded toward the dining room. "Set these out, and take the trash before everyone gets here." That was how Mom loved me, through instructions. The hallway walls were crowded with family pictures. Megan's wedding portrait hung in the center, almost as large as a movie poster. She stood beside Jason in a white silk dress, his hand at her waist, both of them smiling like they had won something. Below it was a framed newspaper clipping about Jason becoming a heart surgeon. My college graduation photo was farther down the hall, half covered by a Christmas card. I had worked nights cleaning hospital rooms to pay for that degree. Floors, bathrooms, trash, whatever they assigned me. I never hated the work. It kept me enrolled. It taught me how hospitals truly functioned when the doctors went home and the hallways got quiet. What hurt was that Mom had frozen me there. In her mind, Megan had married a surgeon, and I was still pushing a mop. By the time Megan and Jason arrived, I had set the table, warmed 2 side dishes, and carried in extra chairs. Mom rushed past me the second the door opened. "There they are." Megan stepped inside wearing a cream coat and carrying a bakery box. Jason followed with an expensive bottle of wine. Mom hugged them like they had returned from war. Then she tapped her spoon against a glass. The room quieted, and I knew she wasn't only about to praise Megan. She was about to use me as the contrast. Mom stood at the head of the table with one hand around her wine glass. "Before we eat," she said, smiling at Megan, "I want everyone to know how proud we are." Jason gave a modest little nod, the kind people practice when they are used to being praised. Megan lowered her eyes, but the corners of her mouth lifted. Mom went on about Jason's surgical schedule, the awards dinner they had attended, and the new house Megan had been looking at in the suburbs. She spoke as if marrying him had been Megan's greatest accomplishment. Then she turned toward me. Her smile changed. "One daughter married a surgeon," she announced. "The other cleans toilets." For a second, the room stopped moving. A fork hung halfway to Aunt Linda's mouth. Someone near the end of the table coughed into a napkin. Jason stared into his wine. Megan smoothed the edge of the tablecloth without looking at me. Then 2 cousins laughed. Not because it was funny, because they were waiting to see whether laughter was expected. Mom gave them permission with a little shrug. "Well, someone has to do it." Heat climbed under my cardigan, but my fingers felt cold. I could hear the vent humming above us and the faint scrape of a chair against the hardwood floor. I had not cleaned a hospital room in almost 20 years. Mom knew I worked in healthcare. She knew I traveled for meetings. She knew I had once tried to explain budgets, staffing, patient access, and emergency operations. She had simply stopped listening the moment she realized I was not a doctor. But that old version of me was useful to her. It made Megan shine brighter. Dad leaned back in his chair with a grin that looked borrowed from someone else. "Come on, Carol," he said. Give the girl some credit. For one foolish second, I thought he might defend me. Instead, he reached into his wallet. He pulled out a $50 bill, pressed it flat beneath his palm, and slid it across the white tablecloth. It passed the gravy boat, turned slightly, and stopped against my plate. Here, he said, go mop something. The laughter was louder this time. Jason gave a weak smile. Aunt Linda looked down. Megan's face tightened, but she still said nothing. I stared at the bill, and suddenly I was 21 again. Pushing a gray cart through a silent hospital hallway at 2 in the morning, my shoes were soaked from a leaking trash bag. My textbook was hidden beneath clean towels because I planned to study during break. I had been exhausted. I had also been proud. That job paid my tuition. It bought groceries. It kept me from dropping out. They had taken the hardest season of my life and turned it into a punchline. Mom watched me closely. She wanted tears, anger, anything she could use to call me dramatic. I gave her nothing. I left the bill where it was. Across the table, Grandma Evelyn lowered her fork. The small click against her plate cut through every whisper. She placed both hands on the table and slowly stood. At 89, it took effort. That made the room even quieter. She did not look at me. She turned to Mom. Tell them where your daughter actually works. Mom opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And for the first time that night, all 17 relatives stopped watching me. They were watching her. Mom's lips parted, but the confidence had drained out of her face. She works at a hospital, she said. Grandma stayed standing, doing what Mom glanced at Dad. He looked at the $50 bill instead. I don't know her exact title, Mom said. Something administrative. The word came out thin and dismissive. But nobody laughed this time. Grandma's eyes narrowed. How long has she been doing it? Mom's hand tightened around her wine glass. I'm not sure. Which hospital? Silence. Each question landed harder than the last because the answers should have been easy. I was her daughter. I had sat at this table every Thanksgiving. I had mailed birthday cards, called on Sundays, driven through snow when Dad had surgery, and she could not name one real thing about my life. Then Mom looked at me, not with regret, with panic. She wanted me to smile, wave it off, and save her from the humiliation she had built for herself. That look took me back 12 years. I had called her from my first private office, still smelling fresh paint and cheap carpet. I got promoted, I said. That's nice. Honey, she replied. Did you hear Megan and Jason picked a wedding venue? Another memory followed. I had sent Dad a photo of me speaking at a healthcare conference. He replied with a thumbs up and never asked why I was on stage. I once called Megan after becoming a hospital director. She said, "That's great. Can I call you back?" She never did. I looked down at the bill against my plate. For years, I had told myself silence was dignity, that I did not need to prove anything, that one day they might ask. But silence had done something else. It had protected Mom's version of me. I placed my napkin beside my plate. I stopped cleaning hospital rooms almost 20 years ago, I said. Mom shifted in her chair. Well, how was I supposed to know you could have asked? The room held still. I am not ashamed of that job. I continued. I worked nights because tuition was due. I cleaned bathrooms, changed trash bags, and studied during breaks. That work kept me in school. Dad's grin was gone. Mom tried to interrupt. Harper, this is Thanksgiving. Yes, I said, and you chose Thanksgiving to humiliate me. Her face hardened, but her eyes stayed frightened. I turned to her fully. Say it, I said. Tell everyone the last time you asked what I actually do. She said nothing. That was the answer. I sat straighter and looked at all 17 faces around the table. Now I'll tell you the truth. I'm the chief operating officer of a regional hospital system, I said. No one moved. I could hear the refrigerator running in the kitchen and the soft hiss of the vent above us. Jason looked up first. His expression changed before anyone else's did. He knew exactly what that title meant. I kept my voice steady. I oversee operations across several hospitals, staffing, budgets, patient access, Emergency planning, the systems people depend on before they ever see a doctor. Mom blinked at me. That's not possible. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because after 20 years of ignoring my life, she still believed disbelief could erase it. It is possible, I said. I started by cleaning rooms at night, then I finished school. I became an operations coordinator, then a department manager, then a hospital director, then a regional executive. Aunt Linda lowered her eyes. One of my cousins whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Jason leaned forward slightly. "You run multiple facilities." "Yes." He nodded once, slowly. There was respect in that nod, and somehow that made Mom look even more unsettled. She turned toward him. "You knew about this, no?" he said, "but I understand what her job involves." His answer landed harder than mine. Mom had spent the whole evening treating Jason's profession like proof that Megan had won at life. Now, the surgeon she admired was the first person at the table to understand the scale of my work. Megan finally looked at me. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice was quiet, but it still carried across the table. "I did." She frowned. "No." "You didn't." "I called when I became a hospital director." Her face shifted. I watched the memory return. "You said you were walking into dinner and would call me back." Megan looked down. "You never did. I was busy." "So was I." That stopped her. For years, everyone in that family had treated my time like it mattered less. Megan's surgeries, Jason's schedule, Dad's appointments, Mom's social events. Those were real obligations. My life was whatever fit around them. Mom set her glass down too hard. "Why would you let me keep saying the wrong thing?" There it was. Not an apology, an accusation. I looked at her. "I didn't let you do anything. I corrected you for years." "That is not true." "It is. You just preferred the version where Megan looked successful and I looked small." Megan flinched. Mom pointed at me. "This is cruel. You waited until Thanksgiving to embarrass me." My hand moved toward the $50 bill. I picked it up carefully. Dad watched me as if I might tear it in half. I didn't. I folded it once along the center and slid it back across the table. "Give it to someone who's choosing between groceries and medicine," I said. "I don't need a tip." Dad's face reddened. I was joking. "No," I said. "You were testing whether everyone would laugh at me." His mouth opened, then closed. I looked from him to Mom. "And I'm done being the price of admission for this family's entertainment." The room was so quiet I could hear Grandma's bracelet touch the tabletop. Mom's eyes filled, but her voice sharpened. "You're ruining Thanksgiving." "The truth didn't ruin dinner," I said. "The way you treated me did." She stared at me. For once, she had no story ready. Then Megan pushed back her chair. "I'm sorry." Every head turned toward her. She looked at me. "Not Mom." "I knew she did this," Megan said. "Maybe not this badly." But I knew. And I stayed quiet because being the favorite was easier than admitting what it cost you. Mom snapped. "Megan." "No," Megan said. "She's right." Jason put his hand over Megan's, but she kept looking at me. "I don't expect you to forgive me tonight." "I don't," I said. Her eyes watered, but she nodded. That was the first honest exchange we had shared in years. Grandma sat down and placed her hand over mine. Warm, thin, steady. Mom looked around the table, searching for someone to rescue her. No one did. I stood. My knees felt weak, but my voice did not. "From now on, you don't speak for me. You don't lie about my work, and you don't turn my past into a joke." Mom whispered my name. Not sharply, not theatrically. Almost like she was hearing it for the first time. I picked up my plate. Then she said the one thing I never expected. "Harper, please don't leave." And that was when I realized the confrontation wasn't over. It had only moved out of the dining room. Mom followed me into the kitchen. The room smelled like coffee, dish soap, and the cinnamon candle burning beside the sink, behind us. 17 relatives sat in a silence so deep I could hear someone set down a water glass. Mom stopped near the counter. "I was joking," she said. I turned around. "No, you were performing." Her face tightened. I didn't know you were so sensitive. A joke is only funny when the person being used for it can laugh too. She looked toward the dining room, checking whether anyone had heard. That told me everything. Dad came in a few seconds later. The $50 bill was still in his hand, folded along the crease I had made. I shouldn't have done that, he said. It was not a full apology, but it was the first honest sentence he had offered me all night. No, I said. You shouldn't have. He stared at the bill. I thought everyone would laugh. They did. His shoulders dropped. Mom crossed her arms. So what happens now? You punish us forever. I rested my hands against the edge of the sink. The counter felt cold beneath my palms. This is not punishment. These are boundaries. She said nothing. You do not introduce me incorrectly. You do not speak for me when someone asks about my life. And you do not use the work I did to survive as an insult. Dad nodded. Mom looked away. If it happens again, I continued, I leave. No argument, no second warning. Megan appeared in the doorway. Jason stayed behind her, giving us space. I owe you more than one apology, she said. I let Mom turn us into competitors because I liked winning. Mom flinched. Megan kept going. Your success does not take anything away from me. I should have said that years ago. I believed she meant it. That did not erase the years, but it was a start. Dinner resumed, though nobody laughed much after that. The $50 bill stayed beside Dad's plate until he finally tucked it into his wallet. 3 days later, he donated it, along with more money, to a local patient assistance fund. Mom sent a message to the family group correcting what she had said. She wrote that I was a hospital operations executive and that she had been wrong. It was awkward, it was late, but it was public. Megan called me the following Sunday. For once. She did not talk about Jason. She asked what my workdays were really like. Then she listened. A month later, I volunteered with a career program for hospital cleaning staff who wanted to move into administration. I sat across from people wearing the same tired expression I used to see in the mirror at 2 in the morning. I told them their current job was not the limit of their future. That night, I hung my gray cardigan in the back of my closet. I was still the woman who had walked into Thanksgiving wearing it, but I was no longer willing to disappear inside it. I didn't win that Thanksgiving because of my title. I won because I refused to let my family define me with an old story. Real love does not humiliate you, compare you, or turn your hardest years into a joke. Boundaries do not make you cruel. Sometimes they are the first honest thing you can choose. If your family has ever made you feel small, you are not alone. Have you ever defended yourself against the people who should have known you best? Share your story in the comments, pass this video on, and subscribe for the next one.